Time Machine Capital is a privately held investment company focused on accelerating and capturing IP around applied artificial intelligence technologies. The company sources AI developers from mid-tier universities, provides seed capital for tech startups, and commercializes AI products. Time Machine Capital currently builds cognitive products for music editing, sports training, social commerce, and financial services.
And as promised, half of the founders of Time Machine Capital are sitting with me right now. Philip Walsh joins me.
Hello.
And Philip, quickly, what is Time Machine Capital?
Time Machine Capital is an investment company that is in the process of going public in Canada that focuses on investing in artificial intelligence opportunities.
Fantastic. And tell me about where's your how did you come up with this company?
So I sold my last company, which was in fintech, and I wanted to. At the time, AI was starting to enter that market in a big way. I wanted to invest in artificial intelligence opportunities, and it just so happened that the first opportunity that came along was through Dr. Joe Lisk, who we'll meet in a minute. Which was an artificial intelligence in music opportunity, which found, for me, it found resonance in not only my love for music, but the fact that fintech is a little bit less interesting than the music industry.
Right, and so you're the brains behind the operation.
No, I can't claim that. I can't claim to be the brains behind the operation. The brains behind the operation are actually Dr. Joe Lisk, although
Dr. Joe Lisk where is he?
He's found himself a keyboard somewhere, so he's doing what he does best.
Play it. Wow, that's the brains behind the operation.
Yes.
And he's playing live from, where is he, in London?
No, he's actually here. He's actually in your studio. I think he's found a room somewhere around the corner.
Wow.
And he's commandeered one of your keyboards.
I can't hear him in the feed. Should I be hearing him in the feed, or is it just going straight out? All right, brilliant.
Well done, Joe.
Let's have Dr. Joe Lisk join us now. That was well constructed. Right off the top there. Dr. Joe, so not only are you a PhD computer scientist?
Computer science, electronic engineering, yes.
Computer science and electronic, double PhD?
Well, it's just a department.
Oh, I see. Yeah. And also concert pianist.
Not concert, no, by no means. But
well, you just gave concert.
Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So, tell me about Time Machine Capital. Sounds great. Like you guys are making investments. You're a merchant bank for emerging artificial intelligence. You're an incubator and an accelerator.
Yep.
And you participate in these things financially all the way and then spin them out and on to the next one?
Yeah, so in fact, why don't you start with how we acquire the opportunities that we acquire, and then I'll give an example through the music tech company, Mashtrax, as to what we've done and how that looks and how that's the model for how we go forward.
Okay.
So incubator and accelerator suggest something slightly different from the way we operate.
Mm-hmm.
You want to think of us more as creating seeds. Everybody knows how to fund a company with seed capital and so on, but how do you make the seed? What are the ingredients that go into creating a successful seed, something that is going to flourish and going to work? It needs interdisciplinary knowledge in between artificial intelligence and some other elements, be it music, be it sports and leisure, be it financial technology, but it also needs all of the operational components around it to support it. Mm-hmm. So that's really where Time Machine Capital fits in. It puts everything together to create the most successful seed possible, and then it waters it.
Okay, so one of the challenges investors have understanding AI, artificial intelligence, is how it is applied to either existing functions and its dearth of computing power brought to bear on problems that couldn't have imagined such a ton of computing power brought to it, or it's a new thing that is only made possible by artificial intelligence. But in both cases, artificial intelligence is an ingredient that powers some other function in a business.
It is. It's also the better way to think about artificial intelligence is actually as a byproduct of studying cognitive psychology. So if you look at anthropology, the way that people act, if you look at linguistics, if you look at psychology and philosophy, and you look at all of these components, if you can make a breakthrough in any one of these areas, you realize that the byproduct is, hey, we can program a computer to act on that behavior and act on that information.
Right.
So AI itself is more of a byproduct of these other components. And there's this famous thing called the AI effect, which essentially is whenever we can explain something through AI, it ceases to be AI. At that point in time, we say, oh, that's not AI, that's just like optical character recognition, or that's just driving a car up a road, you know. Right. So AI is this kind of moving thing of the unknown, which is fueled by all of these other components from cognitive psychology. So,
right.
you know, in this very point, if you have a company which has got a good seed of interdisciplinary knowledge in an area, AI becomes a natural way of extending that.
So using this as an example, we're looking at one of your products, Mash Tracks. And this, how does this work?
Okay, so this is interesting. What we're doing here is we're putting the mind of a music editor into a computer. So this is a very difficult skill for people to have, even editors of programs and so on. It's very rare that they're good music editors. So what we've done is we've taught the actual machine how to perceive music, and then we can use this tool to establish briefs. We simply describe the story, independent of music. Right. And then once we describe that story, we can say, right, give me an independent track now, and let me evolve a solution for that track, which is unique, so that brief, which is unique, and then it finds the most accurate way to be able to fulfill that.
Right, so you end up as a producer of music for film, you end up being efficient with the capital requirement for the music because you're only licensing that small bit thanks to your AI identification and alignment tool?
Yeah, it helps you identify music that you can source from providers much quicker than conventionally. So one of the things that this tool will allow you to do is drag in what they call a temp track, so something you can't afford, like a piece of Madonna or Coldplay, and you can't put it on your video. So you can drag it in and it can listen to it and analyze it and say, okay, what are the emotional properties behind this track, and how can I take a substitute which is purchasable and then put it in its place.
Oh, very interesting. So then, in terms of your business model as a merchant bank, how does a technology like this become a contribution to the investment upside of an investor in Time Machine Capital?
So that, yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, so there are a number of ways in which we see the future value being created within the company. Sometimes the AI that we invest in will be patentable and licensable to companies that we don't need to create products and services for. In other cases, it will be products and services. In some cases, there might be a trade sale. There might also be the opportunity for some of these companies to be spun out as more public cos, in which case we can offer the current investors in the company the opportunity to participate early in those spin-outs. Mm-hmm. So it's not, we don't have a fixed view on the way in which value is created, so much as we're going to look for every opportunity possible to create value. As the largest shareholders and the co-founders ourselves, the number one priority we have is making money from this venture.
Right, great. That makes me want to be a shareholder, which I'm probably going to be. So tell me about some of the other projects that you have besides this. Well, actually, before we move on to that, so who would be interested in acquiring this project?
Okay, so given the fact that in essence what that technology is capable of doing is empowering anyone that creates to create the greatest music videos or the greatest videos with soundtracks attached to them. You've got everything from professional YouTubers all the way through to consumers that say they're using Instagram stories. They want to be able to create fantastic soundtracks around their videos. So in essence, I'm pointing already to the sorts of companies that would find that technology very valuable for their customer base, their footprint of users. So we have companies in the world that already create tools that perhaps don't reach the mass market. That might be somebody like Adobe, right, where they've come from the professional market down to the recognition that short form video now requires a different way of approaching this. Yep. If you've got a 14 million following on YouTube and you do most of your videos, you're a young kid, you do most of your videos on mobile in a skateboard park in LA. You simply don't use edit suites, you don't use editing tools on a desktop. You want to go straight to broadcast effectively on a platform like a YouTube. Mm-hmm. We're the only answer to that. As it stands at the moment, it's patented, so we're recognized by the industry as something that has a lot of value to them in the way that the entire world is moving forwards towards. So in some cases, we'll end up with projects that we can license to companies that as I say, they might want the tech, they might want the IP, they might want the team. So we're seeing all kinds of opportunities here for different ways in which AI applies itself to the marketplace that we're in. So on that particular note, we're in 3 distinct areas. We are in music and media, sport and health, and financial, fintech, which is some of our background. Some of the people that invested in the company early on are fintech people.
Right. Okay. So how do you source your technologies? Where do you find these technologies?
So one of the great things that we can do is we have these relationships with the universities themselves. So we can see IP which is coming through those universities.
Right.
We're also moving into the position now where we're sponsoring PhDs in specific areas which are of interest to us. And that means that we are getting constant papers and research and breakthroughs being made over a period of time in a certain area.
Right.
And it also means that, of course, as the sponsor of that PhD, we get to own the IP. So moving forwards, it means that you're actually always... One of the biggest challenges here, of course, is if you have a successful company and it spins off, how do you keep a core team to keep going on other propositions? We've had to solve this one.
Right.
So the solution to that has been to find, at earlier stages, individuals coming from the universities and bring them into the team. So you have a constant kind of flower bed of new talent coming through the AI lab and being able to spin out further propositions off their intellectual property.
Very cool. Okay, so how many of these opportunities are currently under incubation, acceleration in the Time Machine stable?
Okay, so we have 4. We have another 2 that we are now looking at and bringing forward, and we have a pipeline of about 24 that we like. As you can imagine, there are opportunities in this space that we get presented with a lot. In fact, some of the universities we work with now present us with opportunities very early on as somebody that's recognised in the marketplace as having taken effectively soup to nuts some of these projects to market. So we are seeing an increasingly large pipeline, and what we're also seeing, which is probably a feature of the landscape across the board, is that unlike in previous times where universities were very closely tied to corporate finance or corporate financing, corporate support of certain PhDs, some of today's young tech university grads are less willing to be aligned with a large corporate that perhaps they don't share the same values of, and therefore those universities are now looking to other partners to work with. So we're now seeing so many more opportunities that we can bring to market that really is a question of how do we keep up with the opportunities that people are now bringing to us. So that's another one of our challenges. We've solved some of them. One of the bigger ones is going to be how can we make sure that we address the number of opportunities that we actually have.
Okay, so that's how you attract the projects. How do you capitalize the acquisition?
So in terms of the value recognition, or in terms of
the business model?
Right. So we have a process by which we have an outreach program effectively that allows us to identify and run a series of capability qualification criteria, if you like, in our business to say, do we, let alone whether the opportunity itself could be the best thing since sliced bread, do we have the ability within our organization or our network to address that opportunity? So we run it through a process, then we have a scorecard. That scorecard then feeds us with data points. The data points might be, what's the market opportunities, what's the market size for this? Who else is playing in the marketplace? Can we file for patents? What protections can we create around these things? So if it's really, quite often people talk about AI and everyone says they've got AI, as you can imagine, it becomes the new buzzword.
I had AI, I got rid of it.
Yeah, there you go. There you go, exactly, yeah. Well, we'll give it back to you.
Well, now I'm going to invest in it.
Yeah, exactly. So some of the time, people talk about AI and they're talking about algorithmic-based programs or code that they've built within their organizations. We're talking about something else here. We're talking about things that learn, things that are capable of starting to do amazing things in healthcare and other areas. So from our point of view, we are in a situation now where we have a window and we have a situation where AI is on the up. If we can gather as many of these things as we can now, and we scorecard them to recognize that we are capable, or at least we've enhanced, we've got the greatest likelihood of making a huge success of these projects because they fit the criteria that we ourselves put down, then there are infinite opportunities here.
Right.
The big companies are looking at this all day long, but big companies are big companies.
Right.
We're not. So we're nimble, small, friendly, hopefully. And,
Friendly? You seem quite friendly.
yeah, there you go.
I was going to say one of the core things about the scorecard itself is if you think about any investment, an investment itself is really a punt on trying to predict the future.
Sure.
You're betting on something and saying, well, I'm looking at all the information, now I'm hoping, from my perspective, I think this is going to rise, which is why I'm going to back it.
Right.
Well, that prediction of the future is the sole and kind of only real reason for intelligence. So intelligence is there to help you predict the future.
Knowing what's going to happen next.
Well, at least trying to figure it out.
Right.
So if you have a company which at its core is creating components based on artificial intelligence, then the very question itself of that investability and trying to predict the future is core to the company.
Right.
And I think that's a differentiator.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating space, and it's why I'm so interested in what you guys are doing and why we will continue to follow this story with interest. Thanks for joining me. The next time we have you guys, it will be in London, I believe.
Excellent,
And that'll
excellent.
be in May or sooner.